The sun was just beginning to rise over the bustling streets of Lagos, casting a golden glow over the city's chaos. Chike, a young Uber driver, prepared for another long day of work, hopeful for good tips and smooth rides. As he adjusted his mirror and turned on his app, he thought about his family back home in Owerri. Every ride he completed brought him closer to sending more money to his aging parents. The morning rush had just begun, and Chike's first passenger was a businesswoman heading to the airport. He greeted her warmly, adjusting his seat to ensure her comfort. They cruised through the busy streets, exchanging polite small talk. Chike's professionalism often earned him high ratings, and he was determined to keep his record spotless. But as they approached a familiar checkpoint, his heart sank. This particular spot, notorious among Lagos drivers, was manned by officers with reputations for extortion. "Stop the car," barked a voice as an officer stepped into the road, signaling with an exaggerated wave of his hand. Chike complied immediately, pulling over to the side. His passenger shifted uncomfortably, muttering under her breath about the delay. DSP Bayo, a towering figure with a smirk permanently etched on his face, approached the car. His reputation preceded him, a master manipulator who thrived on others' misfortune. "Driver, come down," Bayo ordered, his tone leaving no room for argument. Chike obeyed, stepping out of the car with his hands visible, trying to appear as cooperative as possible. As Chike stood by the roadside, Bayo and another officer began inspecting the vehicle. At first, it seemed routine, checking the tires, opening the trunk, and scanning the interior. Unknown to Chike, Bayo had slipped a small package into the glove compartment, a package that would change his life forever. "You're good to go," Bayo said, waving him off with a casual smile. Relieved, Chike thanked him and resumed his journey, unaware of the trap that had just been set. As the car disappeared down the road, Bayo pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Bello, it's me," he said. "There's a white Toyota Camry heading your way. Plate number XYZ 234 LAG. On the other end, Inspector Bello grinned. "Got it? What's the story?" "Drugs in the glove compartment," Bayo replied. "Play it right, and we'll get a good payout." Meanwhile, Chike dropped off his passenger at the airport and picked up another ride request. He felt relieved that the checkpoint ordeal was behind him, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. 20 minutes later, he approached another checkpoint. This one seemed routine at first, officers casually waving cars through. But as Chike drew closer, an officer motioned for him to stop. "Driver, pull over," the man said firmly. Confused but compliant, Chike did as instructed. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, trying to keep his tone respectful. "Step out of the car," the officer demanded, ignoring Chike's question. Chike hesitated, his mind racing. He had nothing to hide, but the sudden seriousness of the officers made his stomach churn. "Search the car," Bello commanded, gesturing to his subordinates. They began their inspection, rummaging through the seats, the trunk, and finally the glove compartment. "Ah!" one of them exclaimed, pulling out the small package. The group's demeanor shifted instantly. Bello stepped forward, holding the package like a trophy. "Do you know what this is?" he asked, his voice dripping with accusation. Chike's heart pounded. "No, sir. That's not mine. I don't even know what that is." "Save it," Bello snapped. "You think we haven't heard that before? You're going to jail?" "But I swear, I've never seen that before in my life," Chike pleaded, his voice trembling. The officers began to mock him, calling him a liar and a criminal. A small crowd of passers-by started to gather, watching the scene unfold. Bello seized Chike's phone, claiming it as evidence. He scrolled through it, looking for anything incriminating, but mostly to assert dominance. "Here's the deal," Bello finally said, leaning in close. "You pay us, or you're going to spend the rest of your life in jail." Chike was stunned. "Pay you? For what? I haven't done anything wrong." Bello's smirk widened. "Oh, you'll pay. One way or another." As the officers prepared to take Chike away, a bystander quietly recorded the incident on his phone, sensing something wasn't right. Chike was thrown into a police van and driven to the station, his mind racing with fear and confusion. At the station, the taunting continued. The officers made jokes at his expense, calling him foolish for not cooperating. Back home, Chike's family grew worried when he didn't return or answer his phone. His brother Omalicha began making calls, trying to track him down. When they learned he was in police custody, Chike's parents and Omalicha rushed to the station, desperate to see him. At the station, they pleaded with the officers, explaining Chike's innocence and begging for his release. The officers, unmoved, demanded an outrageous bribe. No bribe, no release, they said bluntly. During one visit, another man arrived, seeking to bail out his son. He noticed a sign on the wall, "Bail is free." The man confronted the officers, accusing them of corruption. "How can you ask for money when the law says bail is free?" he shouted. The officers turned on him, claiming he had assaulted one of them. Within minutes, both the man and his son were arrested and thrown into a cell. Chike watched the scene unfold from his own cell, his hope dwindling. Omalicha, witnessing the chaos, pulled his parents aside. "There's no hope here," he said. "These people don't care about justice." Meanwhile, the video of Chike's arrest began circulating online. Activists and journalists picked it up, sparking outrage and hashtags like #JusticeForChike. But the police dismissed the video, calling it misleading propaganda. The authorities turned a deaf ear to the growing public outcry. Days turned into weeks. Chike remained in custody, his family unable to meet the bribe demands. Omalicha, exhausted and defeated, stopped visiting. "We've done all we can," he told his parents. "The system is rigged." In his cell, Chike vowed to fight for justice if he ever got out. But for now, he was trapped, a victim of a corrupt system. The episode ends with DSP Bayo watching the viral video on his phone smirking. "Let them scream," he muttered. "It changes nothing."
It had been months since Chike's unjust imprisonment, and his family's pleas for his release had all but fallen on deaf ears. The system, deeply corrupt, thrived on silencing the powerless and shielding the influential. Meanwhile, a scandal was brewing in the heart of Lagos. The son of a wealthy and prominent businessman, Chief Okonkwo, had been arrested for a heinous crime that shook the city. A secondary school girl had been brutally raped and murdered. The victim, a bright and promising student named Reby, was found in a secluded alley, and all evidence pointed to Colonel Okonkwo, Chief Okonkwo's spoiled and reckless son. Witnesses had seen Colonel's car near the scene, and CCTV footage placed him at the location hours before the crime. The public was outraged, demanding swift justice. Colonel was arrested, and for a moment, it seemed justice might prevail. Social media buzzed with hashtags like #JusticeForReby, and activists pushed for a fair trial. Colonel's demeanor during the trial was defiant. He smirked through the proceedings, confident in the power of his father's connections. Despite overwhelming evidence, whispers began circulating about bribes being paid to key witnesses and police officers. DSP Bayo, the same officer who had orchestrated Chike's arrest, was assigned to oversee Colonel's custody. True to his corrupt nature, Bayo saw an opportunity for personal gain. As the trial progressed, Colonel was sentenced to 50 years in prison. The verdict was met with cheers from the public, but behind closed doors, Chief Okonkwo was already plotting his son's release. Chief Okonkwo reached out to DSP Bayo, promising him a hefty sum to handle the situation. Bayo, always hungry for more power and wealth, agreed without hesitation. The plan was simple but sinister. Colonel would be quietly released, and a random person would be framed to serve his sentence. Days later, Bayo set his plan in motion. At a checkpoint notorious for its corruption, he and his team waited for their next unsuspecting victim. A young man named Sei, a struggling mechanic, was driving home after borrowing a car from a friend to attend a job interview. Bayo flagged him down, ordering him to step out of the vehicle. Sei complied, his heart pounding as the officers began their routine search. As Bayo rummaged through the car, he subtly planted a blood-stained cloth in the trunk, a piece of fabricated evidence linking Sei to Adebi's murder. "What's this?" Bayo exclaimed, pulling out the cloth with exaggerated theatrics. The other officers surrounded Sei, their faces filled with mock outrage. Sei stammered, "I don't know. That's not mine." I swear, I've never seen that before. Save your lies, Bayo barked. We've been looking for you. You thought you could get away with murder. Sei was stunned. Murder? What murder? I don't even know what you're talking about. The officers ignored his protests, handcuffing him and shoving him into their van. Passers-by watched helplessly, afraid to intervene. At the station, Bayo coordinated the paperwork to make it seem as though Sei had been arrested weeks earlier and confessed to the crime. Meanwhile, Cunnel was quietly released under the cover of darkness. His father's influence ensured that no questions were asked. Sei's world crumbled as he was thrust into a nightmarish legal battle. The evidence against him was damning, fabricated by Bayo and his team to ensure there were no loose ends. Sei's family, like Chike's, was poor and powerless. They begged and borrowed to hire a lawyer, but every attempt to prove his innocence was thwarted. Cunnel, now free, resumed his lavish lifestyle. He posted pictures of exotic vacations on social media, showing no remorse for his crimes. The injustice festered like a wound. Activists who had fought for Adabi's justice were shocked to see Cunnel out and about, but their inquiries were met with silence from the authorities. Chike, still in prison, learned of Sei's plight from fellow inmates. He felt a pang of familiarity, a system that preyed on the innocent while the guilty walked free. In the shadows of the prison yard, Chike and Sei crossed paths. Though their stories were different, their pain was the same. "You don't belong here," Chike told Sei one evening. "None of us do." Sei nodded, his eyes filled with despair. "But how do we fight this? They have all the power." Outside the prison walls, Chief Okonkwo celebrated his success. He threw a lavish party, attended by influential figures, including corrupt police officers who had facilitated Cunnel's release. Bayo, now richer than ever, basked in the praises of his peers. To him, justice was a commodity, easily bought and sold. Meanwhile, Emeka, Chike's brother, stumbled upon an online group dedicated to exposing police corruption. He shared Chike's story, hoping someone would listen. The group's members connected the dots between Chike's case and Sei's, noticing similarities in the officers involved. A whistleblower within the police force anonymously leaked documents implicating Bayo and his team in multiple cases of misconduct. The group began piecing together evidence, preparing to expose the corrupt officers. Their goal was to not only free Chike and Sei, but to dismantle the network of corruption. Back in prison, Chike and Sei formed a bond, supporting each other through their shared ordeal. Their conversations often revolved around hope and resilience. One day, Chike said, "The truth will come out. They can't hide forever." Sei, though skeptical, found comfort in Chike's words. Together, they resolved to keep fighting, no matter how bleak their circumstances seemed. As the episode reached its climax, the online group prepared to release their findings. They knew the risks, but were determined to bring justice to the innocent and expose the guilty. In a dramatic twist, one of the group members managed to hack into police databases, uncovering a trove of incriminating evidence against Bayo and his team. The files included falsified reports, bribe transactions, and even surveillance footage showing Cunnel's release. The group leaked the evidence to a prominent journalist, who began preparing an explosive exposé. The episode ended with a cliffhanger, Bayo receiving a cryptic text message that read, "We know what you did. Justice is coming." Bayo's smirk faltered for the first time as he stared at the message. The walls around him were beginning to close in. Cunnel, oblivious to the brewing storm, partied in an upscale club, unaware that his days of freedom were numbered. Chike and Sei, though still behind bars, felt a glimmer of hope as whispers of the exposé reached the prison. Chief Okonkwo, sensing trouble, began making frantic calls to his allies, trying to cover his tracks. The stage was set for a showdown between truth and corruption, with lives hanging in the balance.